Welcome everybody to a surprise interview that you guys didn't know was going to happen tonight. We're going to be talking about UAPs with demonology expert Nathaniel Gillis and UAP expert Dave Zed of Generation Zed Podcast. To all you who are new, welcome. I figured I'd put these two minds together to see what they have because they're both very, very deep in this stuff. And a lot of you, I haven't really touched the UAP or the UFO phenomenon, to be honest, because I'm not that big into it. I do know some stuff, but I'm not that big into it. But the reason I'm having them on is because this cuts through the bullshit. They will tell you what they can, and I'll give you guys a jump off point, and then I just want to hear what you guys have to say. So, can we do anything any more obvious than Roswell?
Well,
sure. Take it away, brother.
First off, thank you, Micah, so very much for bringing us together. I always appreciate the ideas you have in bringing together people from various ends of the community, the spectrum, you name it. So seriously, thank you. If I may ask, when you say, can it get more obvious than Roswell, if I could ask, in what sense?
I mean, just in, like, you've seen the movie Independence Day, right? Where they said that, the whole alien crashed in 1947, everything's been kind of shut off, this, that, and the other thing. I honestly don't know where to start with this. If I were to ask Nathaniel, he's going to say that this goes back millennia. If I ask you, you'll give me the common day, what you're allowed to tell us.
I see.
You know what I'm saying? So
yes,
when you're saying, if I say the words basketball to you, you think Michael Jordan. If someone says the word UFO to a random person, they think Roswell.
Right. Okay.
So I figured we could just start there, and then I want to see how your guys' works interact with each other.
Sure. So I would dare to say that, as a matter of fact, one of the things that, to be honest with you, that's recently I've come to learn in probably the last 6 months of my research is that, again, just like Dr. Niels Bohr said with respects to what we call quantum physics. And I know that, again, the word quantum's thrown around so vaguely. Trust me, I'm with you guys and getting pissed off with when everyone says, what the hell does that even mean? But in this thing of what Dr. Niels Bohr said many decades ago, if you haven't realized that when it comes to quantum physics, everything that we consider real is made up of things that are inherently not real or non-tangible, non-material, he then says, then quantum mechanics truly hasn't baffled you. And I think I would dare to agree, whereas 8-10 months ago, perhaps I would have not disagreed, but taken a different perspective. As of right now, I would agree very strongly with what Nathaniel and Nate's work is leading on, because I think, personally, I think this speaks to the concept of non-locality versus locality, the micro versus the macro, fractals. How big?
Can you define? Not everybody's familiar with this stuff. So before you jump into this, I want to share something. I shared a video today. I was talking about this hypnotist about 40, 50 years ago, that the government actually sent him a letter saying that his research is invaluable. What he did was he put a gentleman under hypnosis, and the gentleman had an 8-year-old daughter with him, and he said, you will not be able to see her by any means. You're talking about non-locality, you're talking about superposition, you're talking about the idea that what we think is real. I talk about the fact that the atom is 99.99999% empty space, and the rest are just eigenvalues in a wave equation. So it's like the mathematical probability of actually observing something. He puts this guy under hypnosis, okay? And then the 8-year-old daughter is like jumping and dancing. She thinks it's hysterical that he can't see her. What this guy then does is he takes a pocket watch and he shoves it in her back. And he asks the guy if he could see what he has in his hand. And the guy says a pocket watch. And then he goes, okay. And the guy's even able, through his daughter, because he's not allowed to see her, he sees the time on the pocket watch and it's connected.
To that point, that example there, to Micah's audience, thank you for stopping me to help clarify. If we follow that great example Micah just gave, I would also say, to add to that, what we're seeing when it comes to non-locality is the interaction or action of something separated from space and time from the original source of that action or thing. So for example, if something occurs here, there may be, again, a pattern in the water that we say to ourselves, well, it can only be just here, but somehow there's another water bottle somewhere else that has that exact same, for example, fluctuation or pattern, if you will, within the water that is identical and moving in harmony and synchronicity with this one. but it is not. The other one is not even remotely close in physicality and geographically to this bottle. So that would be probably the best way I can break down non-locality. But if I may very quickly say and wrap up that from an archetype perspective, I think from a grand perspective, I think we are as Graham Hancock says, a species that has been hit on the head with amnesia. I say this, for example, if you look at Charles Lieber's academic papers on bio-nanoelectronics and things like this, you see, for example, what are called an electromagnetic combing technique, where at the nano level, if we scale that up a little bit and we sort of simplified it, it's no different than the tuning forks of the ancient times, cutting through rock like a knife through butter. So I think from a grand perspective, events like Roswell that you mentioned, Micah, I think speak to a larger, perhaps, for lack of a better term, underlying blueprint of things that may be set to come. And I don't mean to speak on fate. I do am of the humble opinion that fate, destiny, or the future is sort of like a water flowing through a river. There could be a rock thrown in randomly and the water will have to flow around it. I think what we consider time, fate, destiny, whatever, as you see fit, that mixed with Micah's presentation he gave the other day on my show about how we are all the universe experiencing itself. I think that creates those adjustments in certain chronologies of timelines. And I think Roswell would be an instance of that. So that's where I go.
Gotcha. Well, we all know that the only moment is now. You can't touch the past and you can't reach to the future. The only moment is now. And what's even further than that is that everything, past, present, and future, is on a higher dimension, is all happening at the same time. See, time doesn't work the same on a higher dimension. We only experience this forward motion because you can't function in a meat suit unless you have a forward moving time, the aging process, and anything. But so, Nate, I want to bring it to you real quick, though. So we touched on Roswell real quick. With your demonology and everything, can you pitch in with this? Can you tell us, like, how far back have you traced it? Basically give us some information.
Well, I think that the UFO concept is remotely modern in the sense of, okay, there's a saucer, or there's whatever, it's something in the sky. We still have yet to define what a UFO is. Is it here? Is it there? Is it us? Is it them? Weird. However, what I've been able to do is look at the UFO abduction phenomenon through an ancient lens. What were our ancients experiencing, and how did they perceive the phenomenon? And so, in terms of the UFO abduction phenomenon and that UFO aspect of it, I've been able to trace that lineage all the way back to the late Iron Age, where Lamashtu was staring into the eyes of pregnant women and stealing the child. I'm not a proponent of a lot of these other researchers who are just, the phenomenon just arrived. Well, it's been here. And it's a lot like Dave said, we're just now learning how to remember. That's what the research is about. What have we forgotten? And the question to me is, who is making us forget? Is there some species out there that is acting concurrent to our evolutionary process? That's right. So that's what I'm looking at. But I've been able in my research to locate at least some, not just some, but many case studies, even the late Iron Age to the 16th century to the debug phenomenon. And I think that at least some of our ancestors perceive these beings to be demons, not that they are.
It's important to mention, let me just jump in real quick and then I'll give it back to you, Nate. It's important to mention that the religious people believe that aliens are actually demons. Okay, this is the fact. This is part of their dogma. Okay, religious people believe that aliens are all demons. None of them are benevolent. None of them are peaceful.
Right. And so in my line of work, especially when I do interviews and lectures, what I'm dealing with are dogmatists who in their own way have created their own religious cult. And it's either this or this, and it's a demon. It's a demon. So what I've had to do this is to weed through the many case studies throughout history in religion and say, okay, why did you interpret one as a demon and the other as an angel? Right? What are the definitions in linguistics? What does that all mean?
Nate, may I ask, do you also look at what are the characteristics that made them, for example, I quantify one as an angel, one as a demon, or one as a Right.
And it goes way beyond just the linguistic definitions. And so, we do have experiences throughout antiquity. We have the same, and this is profound to me, we have the same victimologies, the same sexual pathologies that we're experiencing in modernity. So that's where my work has been focused on right now, is the missing fetus syndrome, where it fit into the blueprint of history, and how we can apply what we've learned from our ancient ancestors to the 21st century. Not to say that, we're limited to their definition or the descriptions, but what were, like you said, what were the characteristics? What were their behavioral patterns? Were there any bloody footprints in the snow that we can point at for a fact and say, hey, listen, like I said, it's the same sexual pathology. The behavioral patterns are the same. And that's
Can you
why,
define the sexual pathology?
yes. And so I liken it to a serial killer who goes in and he has his own preference, right? His own sexual preference, his own ritualistic ways where he'll bind the hands and stuff like that. So when we're getting into their sexual pathologies, absolutely, we knew these beings as incubi, succubi throughout history, and they were taking seed from men, hello Barney Hill, and inseminating it in women. Mm-hmm. And it's the same phenomenon. It's just we, in the religious lens, called it something different. And so that's where I'm at. I won't take the floor or anything, but that's where I'm at.
Okay. Dave, something just came to my mind. I was scrolling through Facebook and I saw something that was interesting, and I want to get your complete overhead thought on this. Okay. I read an article, interestingly enough, saying that Tom DeLonge is going back to Blink-182. I don't know if you've heard this yet, but this was posted today. Tom DeLonge is going back to Blink-182 and they're doing arena tours. Now, to the Stars Academy, which was, I think, founded by him. I wonder, what are your thoughts based on that? If he's going back to music, do you think maybe he hit a roadblock that he knows he can't get past?
There's been, well, listen, I'm not going to beat around the bush. There's been conversations that, for example, there have been very, very vehement and strong efforts behind the scenes amongst various, if you want to call them factions or elements, as we lightly touched on the other day, battling it out. And what we see sometimes in the press, what we see get leaked via the DOD and things like this are a result of those infightings, if you will. There's been speculation that we see, for example, I don't want to quote him here because I did not read the entire article, to be fair to Mr. Mellon, but Christopher Mellon, who was one of the original members as part of the Stars about 5 years ago, put out an article, I think yesterday or the day prior, or at least made a comment, and I'm paraphrasing here, where basically he said there was an attempt to bring this UAP knowledge to some degree out with little support from within. And I want to be very clear to your audience. I'm paraphrasing. I encourage everyone to go check Mr. Mellon's quotes on that. There's a part of me also that wonders as well if for example, people like Mr. DeLonge are. And I don't mean this in any nefarious manner, but like some others, like any other person, like a human being, you lose interest in a particular topic and maybe he's going back. As to specificities, I honestly wish I could say, but I don't know. It's certainly, don't get me wrong, it certainly breeds for speculation, absolutely. But what I will say is that there are multiple different groups or elements, in my opinion, that are working actively behind the scenes to both attempt to prop up groups like To the Stars Academies, but also other groups looking to for lack of a better term, destroy and character assassinate groups like TTSA. So, and I don't claim to be on either end of that spectrum. I myself don't know where I stand still, but when I look at it from that perspective, I see it ultimately when, again, going back to the concept of what's the end goal, what's the end game here. The same way that Nate looks into, the history and all of that in a way that I simply don't have the talent to do so. For me, it's more so looking in modern times, what are the factions behind the scenes that are battling? And for your audience, Micah, I'll wrap up this ramble by saying that I liken it to the for example, the 5 mafia families of New York, in the sense that we have to understand, sure, some humans are much smarter than others, don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, these are groups of humans, for lack of a better term, conspiring, whether for better or worse, against other humans to shape a particular narrative, agenda, perception, you name it. So within those 5 families, again, let's stick with that metaphor very quickly. Okay, overarching, the overall goals of the 5 families of New York are the same: make money, prosper, continue to run the family business, as they say. But within each family, you then have politics. Within the politics, you then have factions. Within the factions, you then have personal friendships. Within those, you then have intents and jealousy. So it's the same way that one, in my opinion, cannot say, well, it's all the CIA, man. You're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So that's where I go on that.
would you liken the both of you, question, would you liken the disinformation campaign in the UAP community to that of mainstream media, or what kind of similarities do you see in that?
Nate, you want to go first, or?
Yeah, I do think there is there's obfuscation going on, obfuscation, whatever. And it's rough. I hate it. I dislike it. I never liked it. But I do believe that some of these people are employing an old Bud Hopkins right. He loved doing this. When he would go out and he would tell people that he has either pictures or drawings from children of symbols found on UFOs. He would never tell them what symbols there were. And he would, I guess he would. Sometimes he wouldn't, but other times he would give them fake symbols. And then at the end of the lecture, somebody would show up and say, hey, I saw those same symbols. Well, I just made them up. But it wasn't until the right person who came along and said, look, I don't know, those aren't really my symbols. They look like a kid, somebody else drew them. But what do you think about these? And then he would sit down and say, okay, I've vetted you. These are what I was actually referring to. This is what I actually have.
Right.
So I think there is a measure of illicit deceit going on. And some of it is orchestrated to shut people down, to obfuscate the topic from moving deeper into this research. And others, I think, there are vetting people in a certain way, like Bud Hopkins did. So it's deceitful in both ways. So we're kind of at the bottom of the barrel, like, what the hell's going on,
Yeah.
We don't know. I don't know what I don't know. How about that?
Okay. What about you, Dave?
If I may say to Nate's point, actually, I would actually double down on that point in the sense that we don't know what we don't know. There's that angle of it. I'm also, to add to Nate's point, not to rebut it, but to add to it, I would say that I've witnessed, and again, to be clear to your audience and to be fair, this is just in the context of what I've witnessed. So again, this is just me. I'm not speaking on for everyone else, but I've seen certain people potentially get so close, potentially, to and allegedly to perhaps cracking, some of this forbidden science, if you will, or some of this, and the disinfo campaigns ramp up, or what seem to be disinfo campaigns wrap up. I don't want to say for certain because I'm not, in these intel rooms doing it with them, but I think ultimately when you see it ramp up, it's kind of like, okay, if these people are so quote unquote, for lack of schizophrenic, crazy tinfoil hatters, why the sudden ramp up in attacks on the individual, whether it's on Twitter, Facebook, you name it? For me, that's cause for questioning. Now, again, does that mean that we can write off, oh my God, the guy cracked it? No, but it speaks to there being a there to some extent. Is there something under our noses that we're not seeing that is truly in plain sight, if you will?
I would be interested to hear if you hear anything more, since I guess I broke the news to you about Tom DeLonge. Anything that you could find out about that? I think that's. I mean, he left the band to start this academy with his money. He's not broke, and now he's going back on an arena tour, so close to when people are saying disclosure is going to happen. So my question to both of you guys at this point would be, why is disclosure so fucking hard? And what do you think would happen to religion if we knew we weren't the only ones?
Nate, if you want to.
Oh, man. Well, the only way I could approach that question is, and again, this is going to be painful, is to listen to some of the explanations from these whistleblowers. I mean, even abductees, right? I know for a fact, at least in my research, I've been in contact with people in the UK who aren't demonologists, but they've worked for the UK government and they're doing investigations in their own military buildings. And they've come to the conclusion that the UK government believe they're demons of some sort, at least, the very least, deceptive as hell, malevolent as hell if they want to be. And so one of the reasons I believe personally that they're obfuscating it and kind of hiding it and, giving out a lot of lies to just kind of propagate propaganda is because this would destroy every religious take, probably on evolution, probably on God, probably on the evolution of consciousness, and our position as a species. Because if this phenomenon has taught us anything, maybe we're not the superior species here. Maybe there is something out there. And I did a show with somebody the other day. It was hard to express this because they were they're so dogmatic they couldn't think through the thoughts. Right? What if there is a phenomenon there that has masked itself as alien and demon throughout history, but it's something more alien than alien? and more demonic than a demon. It's something that we literally do not have the vocabulary yet to articulate. It's so beyond us. It's the ineffable. And then yet, if we look at people like Bledsoe and a lot of the other experiencers, they're completely convinced these are angels. Now, these are angels that rape women, right? So we've got a significant problem here. But I think, at least in the religious world, because I grew up in it and everything, this would completely destroy their paradigm.
If I may,
That's one reason.
If I may speak to Nate's point as well, we have this concept of, this speaks to the idea of, again, this angels versus demons and all of that. Right. This is a very, very, to your point, controversial subtopic of discussion, in my opinion, because let's say, for example, all three of us right now, say we're all having some beers in Micah's, backyard or at his house or whatever, and we see a UAP, as they call it now, in the sky. Micah, though, we all see it in the same spot, exact same spot coordinate wise. But Micah, you see a cube. Say, Nate, you see a triangle, a pyramid. I see a sphere. Were we all right or wrong? Again, I'm not trying to get all overly philosophical or esoteric. Right. This speaks to the idea of, again, the dual slit experiment. Reality is only as real as the particular individual or sovereign individual observing it, which then speaks to this idea of your belief becomes your reality, which then speaks to manifestation, this idea of consensus harmonics, consensus reality. And to Nate's point, I think, for example, I think it's complex in a few different areas. Oh no, did Micah leave? Oh,
well, it's just me and you, Dave.
Oh, well, okay.
I was just kidding. I don't know what happened. He's still here, so he probably just went to the bathroom or something. I don't know, but go ahead, brother. I'm listening.
So you have this concept of, again, multiple different groups. You have, again, in terms of very, very current modern times, you got the oil guys, you got the energy guys. They all want their piece, yada, yada. But I think this speaks to this idea of, again, if again, I'm making leaps here, but if it's true that this concept of there being some type of a reset, hey, Micah, we took a pause for you. You didn't miss anything. Don't worry. If it's true for there being some type of a reset, if you will, let's just say, for example, the big talk nowadays is the scuttlebutt. Every 13,000 years, the poles shift, the planet resets itself. Well, for example, say this event is coming soon, in the coming years, for example, you've now had a species on the surface, at the very least, that to a large degree has been kept in the dark. By whom and for what? Again, that's in my opinion, I call it a beautiful shit show.
Right.
You got, let's just say, I'm just making stuff up here. Let's say we got 20. You're the CIA director, and you're told you got 20 years till the polls flip and all that. You're gonna basically have to teach the masses like children, and myself being one of them. Pardon my English. You're basically having to undo 13,000 years full of suppression. So
right.
Problem. Now, I appreciate the question, Micah, because talk about coincidences. If I may, I took a screenshot of something the other day from a Facebook post, I believe, or a post from a gentleman named Ed Harris, former research associate at NASA Ames Research Center. And he posted this just the other day. And if I may, I'll quote him. Yes, the incident of Jimmy Carter crying after being briefed about classified information regarding UFOs is largely believed to be true by the serious researchers on the subject. As a forewarning, the following info is very unsettling and will explain why Carter never, quote-unquote, kept his promise of revealing it. According to the story that was corroborated by more than one witness, U.S. presidents are only given a cursory overview of the subject. This was apparently the CIA runs the program, but it is only on presidential need to know, and presidential curiosity is not sufficient enough. Now, what's interesting is that we notice here that President Carter is a deeply religious man who had also witnessed a UFO with 6 other people. Everyone thought he would be the one to finally release it, but he was repeatedly stonewalled. Eventually, the CIA had what's been coined behind the scenes as the talk with him, and afterward, it was reported that he sunk his head in his hands and not only began to deeply sob, but was visibly disturbed for some weeks afterward. What was he told? And I quote, he was told that the major religions, including Christianity, were programs created by extraterrestrials to prevent us from destroying ourselves while they ran their experiments on us, and that they made us. At this moment, it became clear to Carter that such information could cause tremendous economic and social upheaval. I should add that I am not only a Christian, but a clergyman, Mr. Harris here, so I am in no way attempting to promote atheism here. In fact, how God fits into this might be an interesting separate post. Nevertheless, these are the facts as I know them to be. Now, if I may say, before I wrap up my ramble yet again, 2 other data points line up with this, in my opinion. Of course, you have, Linda Moulton House sources, but you also have as well recently a little, if I'm not mistaken, a sticky note that was given by a high-level doctor from the DOD to President Bill Clinton at the time. And he basically said, he paraphrased it, the core issue, if you will, has to do with consciousness. The doctor said, President Clinton, if we don't come to this conclusion of consciousness is the core situation, we're never going to get out from where we are. Now, again, that's another data point to me that's consistent with what was stated by Mr. Harris there. But a third data point is that you have former CIA official John Ramirez, former CIA analyst, who had said that he was brought into an unclassified meeting where it was talked about that, humans are hybrids from Atlantis. Now, to me, if I'm this then speaks to factions of non-humans. What are their intents? And again, I don't mean to go all over the place here, but this is why I use the words beautiful shit show, because I think it depends which country, which agency within the country, which deals you've made with certain non-human or even human groups, perhaps, which is also why maybe this is a confirmation bias of mine, but I check that box when people say, Dave, what do you think it is? Is it, you think it's us from the future, the past, us from inner Earth? Maybe
that was going to be one of my questions. Are they people from the future?
I'm going to be honest with you. 2 things, and then I'll stop talking. I go with all the above, and I'll tell you why. Because you have, for example, at the Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies 2 years ago, Dr. Pudov stating that, for example, and again, make of Pudov and others as you see fit, but stating, I believe that that all possibilities should be left on the table until there's enough data to take them off. To me, that's very telling, because coming from the perspective of a physicist, an investor, someone who's very, very data driven.
That is no different than Schrodinger's cat, what you just said.
Right. Now, this is the thing too. Coming from someone like Dr. Pudov, you would think that one would say, given his credentials, expertise, no, we got to clear the metaphorical table. And as we find things, we put it on. But in this case, it's the other way around. So when he said that, to me, at least personally, that really stuck out. So that's...
Right. Well, you know what's interesting too? I just made a connection in my mind. Remember the movie A Beautiful Mind?
Yes.
Where Russell Crowe was talking to the military guy to help break the codes?
Yes.
You know what that actor's name was? The military guy?
No.
In real life, his real life name.
No, I'm not sure. No.
Ed Harris.
Wow. That's
yeah.
wow. Well, even Alan Turing during World War II helped crack the German Enigma or whatever it was called. Yeah. They've always had these. Yes. I mean, well, this is sort
that could have just been an ultimate troll.
Sure. And so I don't mean to,
that would be awesome.
I don't mean to hog the floor here, but my whole thing personally is that, and I myself don't know where I stand on this yet. There are individuals for decades that have said, well, if the UFO stuff is real, why isn't the media discussing it? Why aren't former Intel guys coming out and talking? Well, okay. Of course, everyone immediately jumps to usually Mr. Elizondo. Now, even if we put him to the side for a moment, you have many, many others that have come out to some degree or another saying it's legit and all of that. Now, my whole thing is, okay, they've come out. So now there are people that say, well, we still don't believe. Now, to play devil's advocate, to try and view their perspective and understand where they're coming from, there's the whole angle of, well, okay, if it is real, they're never going to talk about it. And if they're talking about it publicly, it's an op. I don't know where I stand. So again, that's yeah. It's
Have you ever gone through WikiLeaks to see all the disclosure documents?
Yeah, which is another data point that's big, where it's like it's never been debunked, it's never been disproven. As a matter of fact, you look at the general's emails on WikiLeaks, it's the same one on the freaking DOD. So it's like exactly.
Yeah.
Let
me tie this into something else. Do you tie the UAP phenomenon, and Dave, with your mathematical background, and Nate, possibly with your symbology that you have, where do you see crop circles?
Nate, you want to take it?
No.
Okay, sure.
Go
Other
for
than
it.
I mean, of course, there's the whole, well, they're pranks and what have you. But let's say for a moment, even if 1% of them are actually unexplainable, sort of like how they view sightings, you can explain away most except for a few, which are like, whoa. But I think they were a form of communication to governments, at least in the last handful of decades. I could be wrong. Perhaps an attempt to communicate to the masses, but um, this speaks to this concept of if there was a form of whether benevolent, malevolent, or neutral communication, I fear that whatever has done this, whether groups of humans at the top on a social hierarchical level or otherwise, or a mixture of both, we've been so indoctrinated to a large degree that, to your point, Micah, it could be right in front of your face and people be like, no. So,
Right.
you
Because
know,
these are absurdly I mean, we're not just talking Fibonacci. These are absurdly like the Tree of Life.
right.
These are absurdly complex
Well,
like mathematical fractals.
that's why I say, in my humble opinion, I would say messages. Some of them, I mean, I would say
Right.
messages to certain governments. I mean, you have, for example, the 2002 Crabwood crop circle incident that has yet to be debunked because in binary code, there was an image of a gray alien and then binary below it where it translated to, I'm just paraphrasing here, beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises, which would speak to the alleged Eisenhower-Greada Treaty, where they signed with an alleged very crappy group, if you will, that promised them tech that they never got in exchange for abducting. It said, beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises, much pain, but still time conduit closing. Believe there is good. So again, now one could very well say, hey, by the way, that's the government using high-level psychotronic tech and things like this to, again, create deceit in order to give the illusion of hope. But I'll end it with this. My whole thing is as above, so below. By definition, something from nothing. If there's bad, there's got to be good. And sadly, if there's good, there's got to be bad. So
would you agree, both of you, that cutting edge technology, things, as I forget who said it, but they said it's indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Would you agree?
Yes.
That cutting edge technology, what leaks out, what we know of, right, is probably 30 to 50 years behind what we actually have.
I go farther.
Yeah, you go farther?
Oh,
right.
I go farther.
I would like to hear about that, but I'd also like to hear about the fact that after Roswell, suddenly the computer age blew up with the microchips, the microprocessors. So if you guys could just touch on both of those.
Is it a fluke the Air Force was formed just 2-3 months after Roswell? That too. So, Nate, please.
Well, okay, so when I approach this topic, I approach it through the lens of, okay, if I were an ancient man looking at technology, what would I perceive it as? Magic, right? And what I've been doing lately is I've been looking at what has been considered magic and possibly it's technology. So when I do lectures about UFO abduction phenomena, I talk about the implants and how in antiquity it was used as necromancy. So what they would do is, it's called teraphim. They would take a piece of metal, and the language makes no sense unless it's technology. It doesn't. But they would transfer consciousness to a piece of metal, merge memory with matter, and then implant it into a body. And the consciousness would then possess the person it's in. We would call that implants, but they didn't call it.
There's a story in the Bible, just to jump in, of how Jesus casts the spirits into pigs, and the pigs run off a cliff.
Right.
Same shit.
It's a transfer of consciousness. So again, with this also though implies that if they're playing with different technologies, then they're playing by different rules because they're playing a different game. And what we're trying to do now is catch up with history. Does it make sense? Where they knew things were working, they're encountering this phenomenon, and again, their hypothesis was that there's gods, there's angels, there's demons. And what I'm looking at lately is, okay, obviously we know there was ancient technology, but I'm thinking now that necromancy and the many ways they had the ability to transfer consciousness to matter to individuals was also technology. So, I mean, even right now, I did a lecture with Rex Berry yesterday on how in Israel, this is a whole different sideshow, or side topic, but forgive me for a second, but they're taking semen from dead men and implanting it in living women. And so you have surrogates.
There's an article I saw today. That's what they're doing in Israel. They're taking dead soldiers' semen, and there's women lined up to carry their babies.
Right. And then this is what they were doing in antiquity. This is where vampirology comes from. And what's happened is a lot of people throughout history have interpreted according to their religious dogmas. It's just like, the UFO abduction phenomenon. Okay, it's aliens, 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 and that's fine. As long as we realize that, number one, if these beings are in fact using technology, they're using technology, like we've all agreed tonight, way beyond what we can even comprehend mostly, which allows them certain liberties against us, the species. I'll throw this out there and I'll shut up. This is a whole different subject again, but now we're getting into the aspect of, okay, what are their capabilities? What are the implications for us as a species? But I was listening to Dave on with Chris Matthew talking about how you can look at an entity, and the entity's facial features look pretty much there until you look at it and there's something off, and you realize this is not. It's projecting an image either into my mind or it's just trying to play with me. And so that's what I'm learning. So my thing is it really technology, or is it magic, or is it both? Because there are factions of the government that are employing esoteric rites to gain access to technologies. Parsons, Croy, on and on.
Nate, brother, I'm sorry to cut you off, man. I want to thank you for explaining in the way you did. This, whether it's philosophy, magic, science, you name it.
I don't know.
It's like for me, it's like this. So, but please, sorry, carry on. I didn't mean to.
Well, the phenomenon is like this, so you pull on one strand, the entire tapestry comes together. And so a lot of us, we're all good researchers. What we experience a lot of times is you pull on one tapestry. People are like, oh my God, didn't you say that before? No, it's that area. They're so intimately close to each other. When you're touching on one, you're unintentionally touching on it all. But dealing with the mask that a lot of the phenomenon wears, and this is where I'm at right now, is that a lot of it does play into roles that we give it. Okay. So this is why when we have people that are believing they're angels, well, why are they angels? Well, they make me feel good. Okay. Well, they give me miracles. Well, what was the message? Right. Well, that's not even the point. You know what I mean?
They do say it, and I always reference this biblical phrase, Isaiah 45:7. You know it, Nate?
No,
Isaiah 45:7.
Yep.
I, the Lord, create the light and create the darkness. I create the good.
yeah.
I create the evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. Dave, when we were talking about what is God, okay, nothing can exist outside the infinite. People aren't ready to have the conversation.
I agree, and not only that, but I also want to say to both of your points, when you look, for example, at this whole idea of, again, what is the bigger picture, what's going on here. Nate made a great point of this concept that I would liken to even I know Rex just had on Leak Project Jacques Vallée, and Jacques Vallée's been a fantastic, in my opinion, describer of the phenomenon, in the sense that you cannot attribute it to one particular foundation, basis, or source. This idea that information structures in your local environment of space-time, empty space as they call it, are adjusted to certain, for example, nodal templates in your brain that you specifically resonate with. And I find that interesting. And not only that, but this concept of, again, Nate brings up, which I want to thank you, man, for bringing up this concept of, for example, rituals, alchemy, the elements, all of this geometry with having to do with, for example, what people call prayer or meditation. Well, for example, there's been this postulation that, if we look at a paper by Gina Mondini and Ezio Gagliardi in Italy, DNA modification via remote intent. I think, for example, this is why it's vital for someone to do their own, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, spiritual shadow work. And I'll explain that a little more to those that say, well, Dave, okay, so the word spiritual is like the word quantum. The fuck does it mean? I would say
past generational trauma healing is what I've known it to be.
Right. Well, see, the thing is too, when I try to explain the concept of my view on spirituality, energy, all of this, I say to people, okay, well, take, for example, a solid, a liquid, and a gas as we know it. What's lighter than a gas? We don't technically on the surface know per se. Well, does that mean it's not there because we cannot observe it or experience it? Absolutely not, right? So when I see this, I say to myself, okay, if we take something lighter than a gas that could theoretically exist and we put it inside of something more solid, one could argue that would be the soul inside of perhaps a container, a body, a vessel,
right?
And my whole thing is that, again, I don't know yet where I stand on this possibility of mixing, implants and tech with the organic way of life or the natural blueprint of life. I'm not for it nor against it. I think, as with everything else in life, moderation is key, because they say, a lot of these even benevolent ET factions use tech, but as Dan Winter has claimed, and Elena Denon and all of them, that, both as they paraphrase, both the good and the bad guys use some of the same tech sometimes. Again, it's a tool. It just depends how you use it.
Right.
So that's why I think ultimately as well, you see, for example, the lawyer Dan Sheehan talking about how there needs to be a spiritual element here. And I see this, in my opinion, with respects to, just go on Twitter. The technology is moving faster than the mental culture on a collective level can handle, in my opinion. Now, sure, we can liken that to, very malevolent, greedy humans at the top, like the oil guys, the energy guys, paying off the media, so the media puts out what they want.
Well, we were talking about disinformation, right?
Right.
We were talking about disinformation. How many bots are on Twitter?
Well, of course, that story recently broke as well, right? And I'll finish it with this whole concept of, Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum, when he says, in the next 10 years, everyone's going to have a chip in the brain. You'll all be able to read each other's thoughts. Okay. I really don't want to jump to the emotional, like, Alex Jones, let's attack him constantly. But my whole thing is, where is the choice? And not only that, where are the choices? Where are the where are the discussions?
Huge.
If the implants are legit, and this is legit from a nuts and bolts perspective, why are they not telling us that this can be done, for lack of a better word, organically, without the chips? Why? They can't control it, in my opinion. So
now, speaking about the chips and about being able to read other people's thoughts, I don't know if you heard about this, but a few years ago in Japan, they were able to do this. A few years ago in Japan, what they did was they hooked 3 people up to all the wires, right? Mm-hmm. They were each in a separate room. There was a giant screen in front of them, and they were playing a game of Tetris. And much in the same way how somebody who has ALS, just by blinking their eyes, can say different. It's a very similar thing. They were playing Tetris with their thoughts, and they had linked 3 people in 3 separate rooms, no joysticks. With their thoughts, they played each other in Tetris.
I 100% believe this. Yes. I mean, it speaks to this concept of electromagnetic pulsations across the human nervous system. Yeah.
Have you heard of the ability to interpret dreams just based on the delta waves? Well, I don't know if it's the delta waves, but it's all the waves. Basically, they could read it and 3D image it. I think they did that too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
It's all moving towards no privacy, is what it is.
Not only that, but also this also when we speak of from the more nerdy wording perspective, people talk about topology. People talk about this idea of topology and Riemannian manifolds and all this kind of stuff, and ultimately it's indiscernible from magic and what our ancestors wrote at that point. And that's for me, this idea when people talk about science and magic are one and the same. To me, science is magic, yet and I could be very wrong, but unexplained, in the sense that, okay, I've discovered something, it's now scientific, that can be logged in a data sense, but there's so much more I haven't figured out that right now at the time is a phenomenon or is magic. To me, and even if we take a step back and look even bigger philosophically, to me that speaks to the joy is in the journey, the caduceus is life, the movement is life. So
gotcha. Okay, guys, so let's go to this. Did you happen to see, I think his name is Dr. Laszlo, I could be wrong though, but he was on Joe Rogan and he explained how there was a military craft that was hovering above the water, and then it just straight up shot 30,000 feet into the air. And he was talking about it. I want your thoughts on it. But basically, Rogan asked him, he was like, is that ours? Could we do that? He's like, if there was a human in there and it did that, they would be jello.
Yeah.
So I just want your thoughts on that. I don't know if you guys heard that interview or.
If I may say very quickly.
Laszlo, I forgot.
Not delay. Oh. You had a delay, but we couldn't hear you.
Nate, if you want to go, I'm going to be very honest with you guys. I can't. I'm so sorry. I can't comment on this at all.
It's reminiscent of the Chicago O'Hare Airport sighting, right? Where it's the UFO's hovering over the 757 and it shoots through the sky. And it cuts through the clouds and they're looking through storm clouds. I think, again, if we're looking at consciousness, then I think that a lot of these ships are guided by consciousness. So if it is consciousness in there, then of course it's not going to be goo when it comes out. But in a deeper level, and this gets to what you guys were discussing before, if we look at Schwab and this governmental conspiracy to rob us of our rights, I think that there is an even deeper phenomenon here that we need to discuss, and that is: are we already being robbed of our rights by whatever's out there? I say that often to my Christian contemporaries in the field. A lot of times, and I know this is whatever. I know it's me rambling, but the name of Jesus doesn't work all the time. That's robbing them of their rights, apparently. So whatever we're dealing with, even if it is governmental, they're playing by different rules because they're playing a different game. And so right now we're all trapped in this kind of propagandist movement where it's like, okay, the three levels of information: the known, the unknown, and the unknowable.
Right.
Is this the unknowable? Are we always going to be groping in the darkness? What I could tell you for sure right now, that our rights are already being pillaged by whatever this phenomenon is. When these beings are walking through walls and raping women, that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
And I mean, expose something like, okay, how about this? If they're plucking souls out of bodies, or at least peeling apparitions out of bodies, causing bilocation within victims, it's way beyond what a lot of people can even comprehend. And that's what I've been doing. I've been beating the war drum here, not in the sense we're going to war, but in the sense that, hey, we're being invaded by something with a capital S. What the hell is it?
There was a horror movie that came out. You guys have heard of the Insidious movies, right? Yeah. Insidious 2, okay? Came out 10, 15 years ago. So forward thinking, okay? Horrifying movie. These movies are terrifying. It's about a young boy who's in a family of people that know how to astral project. He goes to sleep, he astral projects. He cuts the cord that tethers him to his body, and he wanders in the astral realm, which is a malevolent place. The father has to go there and get him back. Okay, so there's things to be careful of. So one thing I wanted to talk about was
sorry, if I could just say if I could just throw my 2 cents in on the part that I can't comment on to the extent that I can. I'm of the humble opinion that the stuff that shoots up 30,000 feet in the sky from nothing to 80,000 feet or what have you, I'm of the very humble opinion. I could be wrong. That's ours. We have it, and there's a way so that the G-force doesn't affect the occupants.
Gotcha. Now, Dave, can you comment from what you know, from the people that you've been speaking to? Alien technology having cloaking ability, okay? And if so, why would it only be used some of the time? Why wouldn't it be used all the time unless they're looking for disclosure?
It depends on this. I got to be careful. That depends on.
I did preface this.
Yeah, I know. I know. No. It's not
we make you sign an NDA, Dave.
You prefaced it. No problem. No, it's just they're cloaked far more than one thinks. There's multiple ways to do it, and this goes back to that concept of different factions, both human and non-human, and perhaps even in some cases non-tangible nor material or physical. Radar may affect that. Whether sometimes, it's possible you got some occupants that are, say, technologically relative to how we view time 40,000 years ahead of us, spiritually, technologically, intellectually. Some are 70,000 years ahead. So again, this speaks to the idea that even people who've had more benevolent experiences are told, again, by these beings, whether human or otherwise, just because we're more ahead of you in every way doesn't mean we know everything. So.
Good.
Have you heard of Dave? Have you heard of tachyons?
Oh yeah, the tachyon drives.
So for people who don't know what tachyons are, and Dave, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm led to believe. So what happens is the reason we can't crack the speed of light, okay, thusly going back in time, is because Einstein said it is as you accelerate towards the speed of light, your mass increases, and when you reach towards the speed of light, your mass becomes infinite, and it takes an infinite amount of energy to push it through. However, that's an infinite amount of energy. There are particles, they're theoretical. I want to hear you say that they're real next, but they're theoretical. They're called tachyons. and they're already moving faster than the speed of light. And the interesting thing about these tachyons is that not only are they moving faster than the speed of light, but the less mass it has, the faster it will go. So it's the opposite. So it's like infinite until you hit the speed of light, but once you're past the speed of light, it's like you can just continue as fast as possible. If people harness that, if aliens harness that, then they really could be from the future traveling back in time, because when you go faster than the speed of light, time goes backwards. So what is your thought?
I love the I appreciate very extensively. I love the observation. I love the question. If there was a way to crack faster than speed of light, anti-gravity, all this kind of stuff, I would say that certainly that could be one way. But there may be other ways where actually, if you increase the mass, you can actually go faster instead of lightening the mass. But I will tell you that it's possible to go faster than the speed of light. Absolutely, in my opinion. Yeah,
I agree. So one thing I wanted to talk about, Dave, did we do an episode on the Gospel of Emmanuel? We did. Okay. The Gospel of Emmanuel, I have linked. So this is a Gospel of Jesus. It's not an official one, but read the Gospel of Emmanuel, people, because it is so antithesis, whatever the word is, to the Bible. Okay, Jesus isn't dead when he comes down off the cross. He goes to spend time in India afterwards until he rides out his death. A million different things. However, there's just I'm not going to go into it because there's a lot of differences. However, there's one very important thing: the Georgia Guidestones and the 500 million lives that they say that we need on Earth. I've traced that back to the Gospel of Emmanuel. Okay, because there's a section in it that says, if you do not keep it at 500 million, then within 2,000 years, 10 times 500 million will be on Earth. And if you know that, 2,000 years from then brings us to 5 billion people. Okay, so it's quite accurate. Now, the only problem is, we're talking about UFO still, is this was discovered by Billy Meyer. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with him.
Yeah.
But I want your thoughts on him. And Dave, we kind of touched on it before, but you could talk about your thoughts on his, because I've talked to Rex about this too, and he showed me some pictures from Billy.
Nate, you want to jump in? I feel bad for hogging it so much. Please.
No, it's all good, man. Before we end this tonight, can we talk about the astral projection side too? But Billy Meyer, I can't speak on Billy, man. I'm still stuck in the air with. Uh-oh.
Mike, there we go.
Yeah,
Nate said, just to fill you in, Micah, Nate said he's still up in the air about Billy Meyer. There may be something. There may be something there. There might not be.
Hey, there we go. Dave. See. I don't know either, man. I don't know either. Okay. I mean, it's kind of like.
What does Rex? Can I ask? What does Rex think, Micah?
He thinks it's garbage, but he thinks it. He thinks his the. But again, like, from someone from the 1950s, if I showed him a Photoshop of my head on your body, they'd be like, think it's magic. You know, it's like the same thing as what he did. You know, what was it? Was it a McDonald's toy? We just had a good laugh over it, basically. But he doesn't think it's real. But the Gospel of Emmanuel is interesting. So
very much
that's
so.
that. I wanted to touch on Corey Good and David Wilcock and get you guys' thoughts on them.
Dave, it's all you, bud.
Oh, thank you. I will tell you that I think there's a lot of things they've said that are in past years that are accurate, and a lot of things that they haven't. I don't mean to dodge this question. I'm so focused on a few other areas of this topic that I haven't kept up to date lately with what they've been doing. But I wish I could say more, but I just genuinely don't.
Fine. I want to remind people one thing, and then Nate, I want your opinion. I want to remind people one thing. Okay, it's very important to understand this. When you go to the store, if you have an infestation in your house, and you go to the store and you buy rat poison, okay, it is not a bar of cyanide. Okay, they're not castor beans that you break down and make whatever you call it. Okay, that's not what it is. Okay, rat poison is 99.999% food. and 0.000 whatever 1% poison, because you can't just expect it to eat poison. And that's what I feel like a lot of these characters out there, the truth bringers, are. They're 99% food and then 1% poison. So I just wanted to get you guys' thoughts on that.
I've found that to be true. I mean, even my own history with Bible scholars that I learned from, like my dad would fly them into Dayton. I talked to them, and they were. I made a choice as a young man. I take the meat, and spit out the bones, because there's some stuff it ain't right. You just know, like, no. Either you feel it or you've researched it yourself. You know the definition of the word. That sometimes they'll use just a hellacious fallacy as a premise and then build the whole point on that. You're like, no. However, other points like they make are profound and meaningful. So what I've learned is kind of, like I said, take the meat, throw out the bones. Here's a question. We mentioned astral projection. You mentioned it, Micah. Can I go ahead and tell you a story about somebody that I dealt with regarding that entity? Is it okay? All right. This is pretty scary.
You guys, so sorry. Nate, after you're done, brother, I'm gonna have to get going. But this has been an absolute blast, Micah. Thank you for
Dave. Thank you.
No, I gotta get both you guys on the show on my end. We gotta continue this.
Okay, real quick. I think real quick. So I was doing a lecture on symbols that were carved into skin by demons, incubi, underneath the eyelids of victims. And an individual reached out to me. He said his father was a famous remote viewer, and he was literally making a lot of money by going out of body, meeting his guides, a lot like an abduction. They're giving him knowledge, and then he would go and disperse it to local celebrities and local politicians. He said one night his father went out of body, and then he said he came back into his body like he always have done. He's always done, rather. He comes running down the stairs. He's incoherent. He's breathing heavy. He's pale as a ghost. He has a coronary, falls out and almost dies. Boom. They get him to the hospital, and as they're putting on his robe, this is going to be freaking you guys out. Freaks me out. Subdermally, underneath the skin, were religious symbols that were merging to the surface of the skin. We see this a lot in hauntology. Now, this is where demonology falls apart. They were subdermal, underneath the skin first. They moved to the surface. And the same burning sensation, all that. Now, the first religious amulet was the Star of David. The second one was a cross. And the third one was Egyptian hieroglyphics as an arching word. Now, he encountered these as his guides, but his story was that he realized when he was meeting them, it was just like UFO abduction. He's in a silver metallic room, and they flanked him on the right and left, right? This is scary shit, man. And he said when he realized very quickly these are not his guides at all, that he had been punked. They had lied to him. Then he gets back into his body, and now he's dealing with these amulets. Now, according to the research, the only history where I've seen hieroglyphics showing up on skin, specifically Egyptian hieroglyphics on skin, was from Brahma the Mage, and how he called this angel magic. So whatever we're dealing with, demonology is incoherent at this point, right? Because these are three different religions that are, so very much inclusive to each other, or exclusive rather, and they don't believe in the same values, the same amulets. So that's my point about astral projection. Is we can't trust it, and there are entities out there that can manipulate us to just phenomenal degree.
All right, guys, 58 minutes. This has been phenomenal. This is absolutely wonderful. I'm gonna have to go because I've got to take a shit. So I'm gonna let you guys go.
No problem.
I'm gonna let you guys go. I'm gonna start uploading this. Dave, we'll be in touch. Nate, you got my number now. We'll be in touch.
Yes, sir.
This was. Right, I hope we shared some information with each other tonight.
There's a lot more we got to talk about off the air that Nate just brought up in that story that I may be able to at least give my perspective on scientifically. So
perfect.
We'll chat. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
All right, guys. God bless you. Have a good night.